personal ego can be a great barrier to a real awareness. This marks one very great advantage to its automatic quality. When activated by the sound-light reality, it forms thoughts, and each thought takes a definite shape on the astral level. Of course, you cannot teach a machine that it is not good to run into trees, and that the highway is better. You can argue with it for years and then turn it loose on full power and it will run straight into a tree if the tree is in its path, and so it is with most people. They will usually go on doing what they did before in spite of all rational persuasion. If a little light filters into them, a person may change their course of thinking or acting, but never otherwise. If the mind enjoys a certain sensation, it then wants to repeat that sensation as often as possible, quite regardless of whether the sensation is good for the person or not. This is why there is so many dope fiends, drunkards, libertines, cigarette smokers, and why people indulge in anger and vanity. The mind will usually do what it likes, regardless of consequences, unless checked by fear or some higher impulse from the true reality. Of course, if it feels pain from a certain performance, it may instantly reject the mode of action, regardless of its own ultimate goal. Mind alone is neither moral or immoral any more than your car, because it is simply a machine like a computer. The cannibal can see no harm in eating a man that you do in eating a piece of beef. To some people, both are harmful. Morality, sin, and righteousness are largely matters of custom, with an attitude and geography which has been decided upon accordingly. Social customs, ceremonies, rites, religions, and politics are based upon mental habits and are handed from one generation to the next, and so with a history of basically bloodshed and domination, the controlling people of this world have justified their positions and what they have done. Look at the educational institutions and what they teach children who are open to everything that is presented to them. The parents of these children reward the child for following the premeditated formulas of those in control. If the child begins to see through these malfunctioning programs, they are condemned to continue whether they like it or not. Of course, in a society like the two of you live in, you need an application and direction to survive, but the complexity of what is being taught and what the actual goals are only provide a small amount of actual service to the child. A person can become brilliant in the social orders of things and have a life of wealth and favor, but when their life is done, what then? What have they planned for all their life that now leads them to the unknown factor of death? If they had been properly trained by the real guides, they would have a great advantage and surmount everything and become wonderful beings. When their life is over, they will be emotionally missed because no one the person knew had any knowledge or real experience beyond this world, only some sort of belief that they would be going to some heaven. Customs make it wrong in one country to enter a temple with shoes on, while in another it is wrong to keep your hat on. Certain places you can only have one wife, while in others you can have as many as you want. These are mental habits that have been agreed upon. These habits are so strong that people will promote your destruction if they feel threatened by their change. The whole human race is a slave to customs. These ideas are the promotions of the rulers over humans from their gods. Every person in the country may condemn the custom, and at the same time, most people will do their best to perpetuate it. This is because the mind is a machine and cannot reason. Can you imagine vast armies going out with deliberate aim to destroy each other if they had the power to reason? Some would consider all of this information to be very critical of the free will of each person. But those who see it this way do not see the tap lines that society is plagued with. The diseases the world is facing today are not from any mistake, but from all the agreements to the disorders set down by the space gods. Actually, in a way, it is not their fault, because the humans want gods to blame for their discomforts and at the same time plead with them to cure their decided upon ailments. The space gods will not admit to what the humans already want in their lives, and that is gods to do their bidding. Dwayne, Ursha is coming for you. Paul and I have a lot to discuss about his position, so here she is. Have fun and I will see you soon, said Rebazar, as him and Paul laughed as Ursha appeared and took me along. Hello, Dwayne. I thought we could go and play for a while the boys have their own fun, she said as we flew high into the sky over Rebazar's hut. I was really getting into what Rebazar was saying, I said, as we flew along like two birds in the air. You are dreaming on many levels and in many other dimensions. What you are taking in at this time will reveal itself when the future of your presentation is in motion. This is how our real awareness works for those who do have an intent for real truth. You have a perception like Rebazar and Paul, she said. I am too young to be like them, I said. It's not about age, but real experience. You are getting to the heart of what you will someday stand in very firmly. Not only are you being taught with Rebazar and Paul where you seem to be, but somewhere so hidden and special. Would you like to go there and see? She asked as I nodded yes. Ursha stopped us in midair, and then she took both my hands with hers. We faced each other while floating motionlessly in the upper part of the sky as the sun beamed upon us. I liked to watch her most beautiful face as she stared right into me. We both giggled like school kids while she seemed to weave a dream for the both of us. I could sense what was taking place as we didn't move anywhere but stayed very still right where we were. As I looked straight into her eyes, I could see the surroundings gradually change. From the blueness of the sky, there became a soft whitishness all about, as though we were in a dream of sorts. I smiled at her as she continued to hold my hands and smile with me. She began to send me impression from the heart of herself. This is where you and I really are, Dwayne, in a sea of light so finely made for us. This is the softest area of the real universes, a never-ending isness, all to ourselves. You really do understand this place. You and I have been here so many times before, even as the life you are now living. We have always had a secret and special place for ourselves, she said. I was so amazed at what her heart had just brought into being. I knew instinctively that it was her great and wonderful being that made all of this possible as I accepted all of it. She knew this, and as long as we both agreed, then we can stay as long as we want. Yes, you see what I see, Dwayne. someday you will be the great writer and tell others about this, and how they can free themselves from all the destructive drudgery they have lived for thousands of lifetimes. To finally come out of the womb of the cocoon and be free, that is a real life in reality. We stand in our own love for each other and everything we live with. All of this will always be part of us, she said. I woke up the next morning and knew I had already experienced something, but when it came into my personal mind, it was like a blur. As I am writing this from the new nowness, I can see the experience very clear, as it has taken many years to perceive it from my position with this body and mind. All of us have a continuous flow of ongoing experiences which are present from all we have decided, and from this line of creation we learn to eventually become more aware of what is real. It would seem to many that every time one enters into the real universes, that because it is all the same, all aliveness, that it must be the same experience each time. But this is not so. Each time I enter any real position, to the mind and senses, it may seem the same at times, but it is actually always new and more real than before. And this is how reality is. As I now have this overview of myself and what I have decidedly been through, I soon saw myself returning to the scene with Rebazar and Paul. There are some advantages in the machine-like actions of the mind and also grave dangers. If the mind, through a gradual process of suggestion and experience, becomes accustomed to certain grooves of action, it often leads to the wreck and ruin of the individual in spite of himself. People become entangled in the net of habits and customs, while deep in their hearts they want out, but may not have the focused will or strength or of character to extricate themselves or the knowledge. Real knowledge is the first step, and then a gradual training of oneself to a decided goal, such as a total awareness with the is. Real guidance is always suggested. The more the habit is indulged in, the more easily and for certain the mind will run into a groove. At the same time, the new itself becomes less and less able to impress upon its mind what it wants from the mind, or even get a hearing at all. The mind is an exceedingly fine and delicate reality. You have tremendous awareness in your own sphere of action, but in the lower realms you have very little power of self-expression. On the other hand, if you are trained with a responsive mind, you can do almost anything you decide to. This is why mental flexibility through the sound light reality is so important and insisted upon by the real guides. The mind may be divided in another way besides the four faculties or the higher and lower. There is only one mind that acts on different levels. The lower mind, which is more on the physical, the second part is the emotional or astral level, and the third part is on the causal and mental realms. These also correspond to the other bodies of man and the levels in which these bodies operate, each in its own sphere. The higher mind engages itself in positive thought activities such as universal love, beneficial literature, fine music, and other arts that have some kind of benefit to itself and society. The lower mind is involved in making money, deal-making, corruption, eating, drinking, and the indulgence of any of the passions that are out of control with itself. The highest part of the mind, the etheric, which lies next to reality, the real you, is the purest. Below that, each particular substratum of the mind becomes more adulterated with coarser and lower substances. The very lowest stratum is a mind that is little more than electromagnetism. The attention can move from level to level, but it is the same mind working in all areas. The higher part of the mind is like the pilot that gets its impressions from the real you and then passes the information down to the other parts. All aspects of the mind are automatic. None of them calculate results or assign a moral content. Each of them accepts what they are given and reacts upon it without question or consideration. No part of the mind has any consideration for what is best for the individual, except what it has been taught by experience to like or dislike. Only when the real light of the true reality enters the real you, only then does the person begin to consider their options. Otherwise, business as usual in a sphere of minds, and the affairs of this world continue on a downward spiral. The mind is given a stimulus, or if given a stimulus or a temptation, will always act in accordance with the sum total of its past experiences, because it cannot act in any other way. There must be a new driving force from somewhere to get the mind to get out of its old habits. The stronger of the two will get the mind to alter its course. Physics is the best field for the study of mental phenomena. There is not a single action of the mind that cannot be reduced to Newton's laws of motion and the reactions of chemistry. All mentality is under the mechanistic theory of this level. In the absence of real guidance and real knowledge, they are fully justified in their conclusions. With the mind alone, the mechanistic theory would apply with perfect accuracy, but when the sound-light reality begins to enter the awareness of the individual, there is no foretelling what will happen. The U-tune operates by its own light, and the mind must follow, like it or not. The mind is an automated thing, and the real experiences come from the sound light of your being. The lower levels are enemy territory to us. The passions with what the mind likes are always around, and we are only interested in real truth and real freedom now. That was some of what Dwayne the great writer, wrote in New Book 3 of the Adventurous series. The new books are available at lulu.com, or you can get them at PDFs from Kelsey Lynn Brown on Facebook or YouTube. I think if you're trying, you'll be able to find her. There are projects in development like the All-Solar Research Vessel and Nations United Universal University, other things that you can become involved with. So anyway, I'm just trying to share what's being offered by the real guides to you to find out for yourself. Test the new you song before you go to sleep each night. Ask for real guidance and a real education and see what life shows you. I'll end the show with the new song. New you. you. See ya.